Today I have even more practical tips for you to throw in that magical toolkit of yours. Say you're doing everything right that I said in the last video with essential tips. You're eating your magical veggies, you're doing your magical push-ups, all of the more housekeeping stuff. Now you want to get some tactics. You want to get some actual hands-on technical details. Alright, that's what I got for you today. Hello everyone, my name is Solomon Pakal. I'm a generational brujo. I'm a historian, and I'm an occult researcher going on over 2 decades in the practice. Today I've got some pro tips for the beginner practitioner. Tip number 1, have a go-to divination system. Now there's a lot of options for that, right? You would want a divination system that is highly applicable to your practice. Meaning that if your practice is like highly cultural dependent, you're going to want to do that. So I'll give you an example of like a bad cultural translation. It's not cultural appropriation, it's just not a optimal usage of divination plus paradigm. That would be tarot cards but being a santero or santera. And that's not to say you can't read them. That's not to say that you can't practice tarot as a santero or santera. You can still do that, and you can still give readings to people that are highly accurate. But the Delugun is the divination system for Ifa and Santeria. And why that's important is because if you are trying to divinate a message from the Orishas, right, then the only way that they can speak is through the Delugun. They can't do that through tarot cards. Like, it's not accepted. It's not an accepted thing in the tradition that the Orishas could speak through the tarot cards. That one must be versed in the Delugun. And I believe that this is a cultural and paradigm boundary that must be respected. There are several examples like this from across the world. This is not the kind of place for modern people to bring in I felt like I was being told this from my experience with tarot here. That would be implementing eclecticism to a degree that is not only not operationally efficient, but it's just like culturally disrespectful. If this is a part of that question of if you don't like the system, then don't get involved in it. And I'm just using Santeria as an example because I have experience in Santeria, but I'm not speaking for Santeria here. It is a well-known stance from Santeria authorities that the Orishas in particular don't speak through tarot or any other divination method. It must be through the Delugun. And again, many examples from across the world. So say if you're a part of a paradigm that is very strongly culturally linked, you should honor that culture, that host culture. You should commit to its divination systems and whatever its protocols are. Now that being said, say you are a part of a tradition that is a bit more eclectic and it does not have hard stances on divination or like some kind of ritual procedure that the gods can't talk through this, but they can only talk through that kind of thing, right? Again, this also depends on the skill set from which we're talking to beginners mostly, right? It depends on the skill set. Now, I recommend to many beginners and to many past clients, my most suggested route of divination would be oracle cards or pendulum work. Why is this? Didn't I recommend tarot cards? The reason why I didn't recommend tarot cards, tarot is a highly in-depth divination system. In all systems, the rules have to be respected. There's a lot of components that go into tarot, that weave in and out of tarot, correspondences, layered on correspondences, and it's more than just memorizing 78 cards. The other reason why I recommend Pendulum and Oracle to beginners is because typically beginners, they want to start doing things. That's good. Or if they have analysis paralysis, still Oracle and Pendulum, best barrier to entry because it's a low barrier to entry. With Oracle cards, I would argue that for beginners, they're even superior than tarot cards, like even if you just tried to commit to it, because Oracle allows you to immediately start prioritizing intuition ahead of Correspondences in a lot of ways. Many ways. Not all, but some Oracle decks are try to really make a system out of it. And for those, you should respect the system as well. But with Oracle, there's a lot more room for artistic interpretation. Typically, Oracle card readers, they are creating art, and it just so happens to end up on a number, or the number and the art meet halfway. This is not like other divination systems where numbers have very hard meanings. They have very purposeful angles. They have many color correspondences and stuff like that. Oracle cards allow you to immediately start getting repetitions in with your intuition. Repetitions are key in developing skills. And if you can have fun exercising your intuition with an Oracle card deck that you feel called to, so be it. Pendulum works in a similar fashion. Pendulum's awesome because you can get yes or no answers. You can get like hard yeses and soft yeses, hard no's and soft no's. Pendulum work is oftentimes underrated. Pendulum work can be highly effective. Pendulum work can induce visions. Think like your hypnotic thingamabobber going back and forth, right? It can put you into a trance. You can also focus intention into the pendulum, and this can allow you to have spirit communication. And again, with Pendulum and Oracle, you can immediately start diving in. I would just ask that with a Pendulum and Oracle, you don't spend too much time fiddling around with different decks or different pendulums. Get a couple of reps in and then decide that you want to spend a little bit of time with this pendulum. You want to spend a little bit of time with this Oracle deck and give it like at least a good 2 weeks of readings every day. Get a bunch of repetitions and have fun with them. Low commitment stuff. Ask basic questions. Ask basic questions where you don't know the answers to as well, about your day going forward. These are things that you can immediately start jumping in, and you can develop skills. You can develop spiritual muscles that are going to help you with all kinds of magic going forward. And I'm talking about in the near future too. So don't be discouraged in particular with tarot or other advanced divination systems just because you're not doing those famous divination systems and you're doing this kind of more smaller artist Oracle deck or small pendulum kind of thing. Use those methods to build skills, and you're going to see a lot of progress really quickly if you commit to that. Even in short spurts like 2-week time frames, you can get a lot done. My second major tip for beginners is essential spellcraft. So what is essential spellcraft? Cleanse, repel, attract. Cleansing negative energy. Repelling also means, it can mean cursing. Attracting means bringing money in, bringing love in, bringing anything that you want, any kind of desired stuff that you want to bring towards you. So why am I stressing essential spellcraft? Because I think I've seen a decrease in this within the past like 3 years, but definitely mid 2010s through the first 2 years of the pandemic, there was several trends going on of different kinds of magic, and they would have like crazy names for like brand new cutting edge new types of magic. One that claims to use like the dark energy, and I'm talking about dark energy like when you're talking about like astrophysicists. Like there was one magician who wrote some kind of book who claimed that in the book you would learn to harness dark energy, like the mysterious force that scientists don't know about. And then reviews on the book said this person has blind followers, right? And they'll give it 5 stars. But then there are some people be like, I did what the book said and read what the book said, and it sounds like it was just like regular energy work. There was also another magical movement or formula, or it was a subgenre within a certain niche of the occult and spiritual community, where they were specifically talking about creating souls, not servitors, creating actual souls, and how this creation of souls was different than servitors and was not like measly servitor stuff, and that once you create a soul, you can like change your life or whatever, like instantly. Like it was like uber powerful kind of stuff. And for many reasons, documented reasons too, seem to have had the reverse effect. Regardless, it just wasn't good magic. typically when you have people coming up with a bunch of fancy names and cutting edge magic, it's typically a farce. It's typically a scam to try and sell something. It's trying to glamorize a product to sell you. Now, that being said, there's plenty of unexplored and unpioneered magical systems out there. I'm doing one that's basically untapped magic with all of the Mayan pantheon stuff, right? Every pantheon, every paradigm, every kind of magic will still have to follow the fundamentals. I run into this argument a lot with martial arts, too. If the martial arts works, it's because it's following some kind of fundamental. And it's the same thing with metaphysical arts. There are metaphysical fundamentals. My tip for beginners with essential spellcraft is to try and do it without spirits. Yes, I know that doesn't sound very helpful, because when you think spirit magic, you think more power, you think more muscle. Yes, but I would also say that most spirit magic isn't for beginners, and typically when beginners jump the gun, they're not developing their other magical skills, they're getting into trouble with these spirits typically. And if they just dialed it back and tried to manifest some stuff by themselves, then they would actually get closer to their goals than trying to jump straight to a spirit. So find magic that you can do without spirits is my tip for essential spellcraft. So think about adding your own energy to things, whatever kind of energy system that you want to get into. There's a few different kinds, believe it or not. There's also an animist approach to it, where it's like, you may be talking to the spirit of a certain ingredient or something, but I guarantee you, the spirit of cinnamon or tobacco is not an archangel. It is not a pagan god. So when you are talking about like localized animistic frameworks, that is still different. And I would encourage you to do that over like when you think spirit magic of like grimoire stuff or like hardcore pagan things. My third tip, practical tip for beginners: learn correspondences. Learn all kinds of correspondences. Now, correspondences are not all the same. They're paradigm dependent. One of my favorite examples is this, is that in Western mythology, Western mysticism, the whole Western current, right? The Western mystery traditions, 13 is considered bad. Obviously, this has to do with the Knights Templar, Friday the 13th, all that, right? In Mesoamerica, 13 is the holiest number. It corresponds to the heavens. There are 13 levels of heaven. So understanding the difference in these cultural paradigms and how they regard correspondences, first of all, keeps you from culturally appropriating things, but it also just helps you with your effectiveness in spellcraft. Familiarizing yourself with correspondences is good. You need to start doing that as a beginner. Keep this in mind, though. Memorizing correspondences is not substitution for skill. It helps you raise your comprehension. So what do I mean by this? There is a more advanced tip I'll make a video on that has to do with essentially like the one thing advanced practitioners all have to know. But the thing is, to get to that tip, you have to be very generally familiar with correspondences of all kinds. You don't have to memorize every correspondence, by the way. I am not the most well-versed on every single Western astrological correspondence there is. Like, don't ask me about mansions of the moon. But I know my basic stuff. The basics, like the big chunks of the sky. And I can go in depth in those as well. You don't even have to do that. You just have to know the big pieces there. You don't have to even go into depth of the major pieces. Learn your correspondences, basic candle stuff, candle color correspondences, herbal correspondences. These are a bit more functional correspondences. I would even learn seasonal correspondences because these things are much more immediate to us. And then there are advanced correspondences for those advanced practitioners, but you're not going to get there, and it's not going to make a lot of sense unless you get that first. My fourth tip for beginners, and I really mean this one. Read actual history books on the practice you are getting into, not just books about magic. I get questions all the time about, do you have any resources on Mayan magic? Do you know of any books or authors when it comes to Mayan magic? And do you know what that question actually means, do you know of a Llewellyn or Weiser book that has to do with Mayan magic that is good? And the answer is no. Specifically for Mayan magic, no, there hasn't been a good one. There's some asterisks to that, but it's not about magical praxis. It's more about like astrology and whatnot. But when people are asking this question, they're typically asking for magic books. Like they want to read books that like essentially give them permission to believe in magic, or believe in magic in the proper context of this culture that they're getting into. The problem with that is that there are good occult authors, right? There are good metaphysical authors. And then there are a lot of shite ones. There are a lot of metaphysical authors that clearly have never really looked at the historical record of the path that they're trying to represent. There are metaphysical authors that are implementing aspects of other cultural magical systems onto others where they're not native. Sometimes they're actually effective, and sometimes they're in semi-good taste. And then sometimes they're not. The other reason why I think people don't want to read history books, first of all, they think it's boring. Second, and here's my counter to that. If you actually want to get good at magic, then you would be passionate about the cultural paradigm you're getting into. If you're not passionate about it, I think your intentions are different. I don't think they're good. You're looking for a quick fix, and you're going to use a culture's, even if it's your own culture's. But like your ancestors really pitched in to bring this through the ages with proper representation to do proper honor to those gods or those magical forces. Typically, people are looking for like microwave magic. They're looking for like results. I want to just, in 30 minutes, have what I want, kind of thing. But the other reason why I think magic people don't want to read history books is because they think if they read history books, it's going to consist of a bunch of information that is counter to believing in magic. That it's a disenchanted view of reality. Here's the thing, and I can say this as a historian. The historical texts I read, and trust me, I have to read a lot more than the average occultist. Actual history, I have to read a lot more than probably most professional occultists too. I have to read a lot more history. Why? Because I am also reconstructing a practice. I have to read more history. And I'm telling you right now from what I'm finding, and have been finding, that the history actually complements the magic. You have people in the form of archaeologists and academics. Yes, they are either conventional religions or they're atheists. But the thing is that as an occultist, I read it and I see occult things. What they're talking about are occult and magical things. They themselves may not believe in it. They might not know how to articulate it because they are not practitioners and they are not theologians. But I, as an occult practitioner, I see it. I see it big time. And if you are a good occultist, then you can pick out those little bites of the divine in academic papers. And you can do this even as a beginner because sometimes they are just describing magic. And you're like, you scratch your head and you're like, this is a history paper. Why isn't anybody talking about this? And that's the reason, is because it's a history paper. History papers don't really get a lot of exposure and whatnot. So that's it. Read actual books on magic, not just paperbacks on little spells, and not overpriced hardbacks that consist of some ambiguous UPG. My fifth major tip for beginners is to find a magical community. So for some reason, there's a lot of people that want to stay solitary practitioners. They want to be edgelords about it and be nobody gets me and I can't trust all these people and stuff like that. For that, I would say you either haven't experienced the benefit of group ritual or you're using this as a pain point to flaunt your ego and say that, I don't know, you're like a stoic Wolverine type. Anyway, magical community. This can start online because sometimes people are just located in strange and far away places, and you may never meet certain people. I am specifically talking about live community in magic, and I would strongly encourage any and everyone to make an effort at times to reach out and become a part of a magical community and get together with people. And what are the reasons why? Because you cross-train. When you are having discussions and getting opinions about your own practice, you are cross-training. You are doing iron sharpens iron. You are testing your beliefs, and you are trying to learn new things. This provides also comparative analysis. Now, not all occultists and witches are equally as, they're not as good, but if you can find good people, and I'm talking about not just morally good, I'm talking about just good performance, right? You will find that there are consistencies across every kind of practice. Comparative analysis is really what separates us from any other field. That's right. Comparative analysis, because you want to say, oh, you can't replicate experiments or whatever. At one point, even science couldn't replicate experiments until they formalized various kinds of laboratories and whatnot. But it started off as just like comparing each other's opinions and findings. Like you wrote them down, you wrote down your testimonies, you find similarities and patterns, and you find that they repeat, and you're like, whoa, we need to test this out. And so funding came in, or they pulled their resources together, and then they made labs. They made essentially their own kinds of ritual chambers. And then they were able to draw conclusions and push. They were able to push the art forward. They were able to push the science forward. That is what comparative analysis allows. That's the bedrock for all. So really, the entirety of magic and manifestation, the future of it depends on magical communities getting together and trying things and comparing notes and having testimonies and breaking bread. Now, let me address a concern here. Trust is a major issue when it comes to magical communities. I have been a part of many magical communities, and there are very viable reasons to be wary of magical communities for various reasons that I'm not going to go through all of them here. But safety would be one. And then just like people being jerks would be another. I have been a part of many magical communities that have essentially in some way broken apart, or we had a major falling out with some people. And yes, I have been in the crosshairs with very crappy people in the occult. It's kind of par for the course, the occult and this kind of stuff. It attracts desperate people, right? It attracts weird people. But not everybody's desperate, not everybody's weird. Not everybody is a jerk. That has happened to me so many times, and yet I still persist to try and make magical community. Recently, I was a founding member of a new order here where I live with high-level professional magicians that you might have heard of. And they all bring something to the table that I can learn from and vice versa, and I trust them. This took time to develop, and it took time to develop even before we formed the order, for good reason. And it was good that it took that amount of time, and I'm glad we took that amount of time. So there's no rush, but you have to experiment. It doesn't mean like rush and start a coven. It just means to try to get together here and there, do it a couple of times, and then if there's some kind of chemistry and trust there, then roll with it. Because the payoff is astronomical. The payoff is phenomenal. Like just group ritual, like getting a bunch of people and adding a bunch of energy to it, that's in of itself a game changer. So I completely recommend that you try to do that.